welcome to all of you joining us today for decoding the 2026 hiring landscape, key trends, predictions, and enterprise readiness. So we are already a couple of months into 2026, and for many organizations, hiring plans no longer focus. So they are already in motion. The key question now is, are we executing based on clarity or assumption, right? So because 2026 is not just another hiring year, it's a year defined by rapid AI acceleration, skill first workforce models, stronger enterprise accountability, and a sharper focus on measurable hiring outcomes. So, today's session is designed to help you step back, reflect, and align your hiring strategies with what the year truly demands. So, we'll explore what's changing, what's working across enterprises, and how organizations can stay ahead in this evolving landscape. So let's get started. Now it gives me a great, immense pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists for today. Today we have Preeti Phansalkar, Group CHRO, Bhartiya Group, a seasoned HR driving enterprise-wide people transformation and strategic workforce initiatives. Welcome you, Preeti ma'am. Thank you. We have Sudipto Mandal with us, CHRO and Head, Human Resources in L&T Metro Rail Hyderabad, bringing deep expertise in enterprise HR strategy, governance, and workforce management at scale. Welcome you, Sudipto, sir.
Thank
Yogesh
you.
Pandey, Associate Vice President at Syngene International, with strong experience in talent strategy within high growth and innovation-driven environment. Welcome you, Yogesh, sir.
Thank
And
you.
guiding today's discussion as a host, Alok Nidhi Gupta, CEO and co-founder of TalentRecruit, who has been at the forefront of AI-driven recruitment transformation. Welcome you, Alok, sir. We are truly privileged to have such accomplished panel with us today. Without further delay, I would like to hand over the session to Alok, who will take this discussion forward and help us decode what 2026 really demands from enterprise hiring system. Alok, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Ananya, for swift information about us. So thank you, everyone, joining us, and good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to today's session, decoding the 2025, 2026, in fact, hiring landscapes, key trends, predictions, and enterprise readiness. Over the last decade, we have witnessed the hiring evolve from largely transactional recruitment processes to far more strategic, data-driven, and experience-driven talent ecosystems. But what we are seeing now is not just evolution, it is structural disruption, right? So we are operating in a world where AI is rapidly moving from experimentation to enterprise scale deployment. Workforce models are becoming increasingly fluid, spanning full-time, gig, hybrid, and multi-generational talent. Candidates' expectations are rising faster than most organizations can redesign their hiring journeys. And perhaps most importantly, business leaders are expecting HR to drive measurable business outcomes, not just fill the roles, right? At the same time, there is a fascinating paradox that is emerging. Technology is advancing at unprecedented speed, but human aspirations, career motivations, and workplace expectations are also being fundamentally redefined, right? Enterprises today are not just asking, how do we hire faster, but how do we hire smarter, more predictably, and more sustainably? And that's where we see there are not just building talent pipeline, but they are actually trying to build future-ready workforces. And that's where we bring today with this discussion what we're talking about, in strategy in 2026. And our organization truly ready strategically, operationally, and technologically, for what hiring will demand in 2026 and beyond. To help us decode this, we have with us three distinguished leaders who are shaping workforce strategy at scale across very different complex environments. So I'm delighted to welcome once again Preeti, Sudipto, and of course Yogesh. So thank you all for joining us today. And let's dive straight into our first themes. What is changing in the hiring and workforce landscape. Let me start with the Preeti first, right? Who has led workforce transformation at scale in several sectors, including manufacturing, fashion, real estate, technology, telecom, with significant multicultural experience across different regions of the world, including USA, Europe, Africa, Australia, Asia. Preeti, what do you see as the biggest macro shifts, that will shape enterprise hiring and workforce strategies in 2026?
So, Alok, first of all, thank you, Talent Recruit team, as well as you for giving us an opportunity to share back the knowledge. Quite glad to see the number of participants who've logged in. So thank you even for the participants to hear us out. Moving on. See, I think the whole strategy for 2026 is actually going to change the hiring itself, because you're going to have AI, you're going to have automation, and you're also going to have flexible workforce, which means when I say flexible, I don't mean the hybrid model in terms of balancing work life, but more about people willing to adapt and learn faster. Both are going to be very, very important, because these roles of hiring, which we are going to do, is beyond fulfillment. It's not anymore about just fulfilling roles. With AI coming in, organizations will be forced to redesign their roles. They will be forced to do that. Now, in a context like this, it becomes very, very important to balance all of this. Just to give you an example, and this not necessarily only remains for business or revenue generating roles. This is as good as an example for even your enabling functions. To give you an example, this is for a role of procurement. As an example, I'm going to pick this up. Traditionally, what do we see when we see a head of procurement role in the past has been that, you kind of somebody who is aware of the business model, somebody is smart in negotiations, and somebody is able to kind of manage his procurement budget 100 crores and showcases himself that, yeah, 100 crores is what is relevant and I've met my budget. This is not going to be sufficient anymore. The way it's going to change is this individual will need to think wider, completely redesign your product, which means if you're selling an X product, or even, for example, in my real estate division, if I'm going to look at bringing or procuring material without compromising on cost, he has to go back to the drawing board, rediscover new age trends which are there, new startups which are there, ability to go on the ground, explore, rediscover the price, and not say that, okay, my budget was 100. So it is not going to be relevant anymore. And we're struggling today because you have people who are not role ready anymore. You have people who are ready to fulfill roles. You have ready to do everything. But you don't have somebody who is willing to say, I'll go to the drawing board, rediscover without compromising on quality. It could be as basic as buying tiles for one of my, let's say, residential units. Am I going to go back to the same 3 defined vendors and define my cost? Answer is no, because your customer is going to ask you very, very new things. Projects are going to be ready 3 years from now. Now, how am I supposed to be able to think what I need 10 years from now so that I'm relevant 5 years from now? That is the mindset. And again, it's not just candidates and organizations. It's also the recruitment leads who have to be able to think ahead. And of course, people like us sitting in this role or position constantly demand, why is this role required? So anything which is monotonous, regular, routine job is going to die. And the person who is willing to adapt, learn, rethink, redesign will play a very key role. So organizations who will hire less, redesign their roles, bring in aspects where these people are willing to adapt, learn, because see, they're also competing with your internal talent. So the ones who continue to do routine jobs are sure going to, I'm not scaring anyone, but this is how the trend seems to show. So agility, ability to kind of move faster, learn, adapt, flexibility, and work alongside AI. So it's not about just AI will still remain. Use them as base. Use them as your front-ending tool without really showcasing too much of transformation. Be quiet about it, but lead it. And I think that's where slowly and steadily in 2 to 3 years from now, we should be able to pull along. This is what I feel.
No, I think you mentioned, about adaptable organization and adaptable workforce, with the AI coming into play, a lot of roles will become obsolete and a lot of new roles Even as per the World Economic Forum study, 85 million jobs by 2030 will become obsolete,
Yeah,
but it will also give you, opportunity to bring new jobs, which are,
correct.
aggregating to 97 billion number of jobs, right? So
Very true.
you give the example of procurement roles. Similarly, we used to see in our technology, probably Yogesh must be also looking at, when we used to hire the tech talent, we used to take coding challenge, and we used to put the
Yes.
proctored monitoring, you should not copy from here. But actually now you want code to be copied, right? Because the AI is writing the code. So
Yeah.
you don't need the people who can basically write the code with the help of AI, rather than, so your entire structure of coding test, conducting proctored monitoring actually has gone away, right? So that's seeing the sea
True.
change, and of course every other role. Yeah.
Yeah.
So great. Yeah. Thanks for your insights, Preeti. And let me come to Sudipto, right? So Sudipto has, vast experience in diverse industries, and cultures, geographies, including FMCG, IT, manufacturing, retail, technology, and engineering industry. With large operations-driven environments, HR goes far beyond hiring. According to you, Sudipto, how are HR strategies evolving to balance workforce productivity, compliance, and employee expectation at scale?
Hmm. Yeah, look, I think that's a challenge, but I think that's also an advantage for us. Okay. While I have seen, as you rightly mentioned, complete spectrum of probably the different industries in terms of being a very agile, very fast-changing, fast-paced organizations like in IT. At the same time, infrastructure organizations like L&T or manufacturing organizations, they have a very different kind of a DNA altogether, right? So now, if I have to take it forward from where Preeti left, uh, I must say that hiring is a challenge, but over decades, over ages, we know that if my hiring can be reduced, that's very beneficial from the productivity or ROI point of view for the organization, right? So the cost of replacing one existing headcount is many folds higher. So retention is probably the key, and probably as an organization, what we really have been focusing on over years, that a perfect balance between build, buy, and develop. So wherein buying is an option, but how are we building? How are you developing? That's where L&T's focus has been throughout. So that's the reason where you will find employees are really tenured employees we see in L&T across different individual companies that we see. People have been here for 20 years, 30 years, sometimes 40 years. So that has given us enough dividend where employees have been staying there for long, because the focus has been extremely good in terms of building and developing. Now, building and developing doesn't happen, or if you are not able to integrate the entire other processes well enough, right? So that talks about how not only are you developing, how are you creating the right career path for them, how are you moving people across different roles, how are you reimagining the roles, redefining the roles. So the entire transformation internally that has been happening. Now, that has been happening for years. Now, let me just come back. With the VUCA world, and whereas technology is changing, environment is changing, competition is changing, we need to also be very relevant and updated in terms of what's my context is, right? Context is changing. So in that context, we also have realized that now we cannot rely completely on the tenured organizations. We need to have a right balance. So obviously the huge number of GETs, graduate engineering trainings, that we recruit every year. For example, last year we had about 3,500 GETs we have recruited. Last year that number was about a little over 2,000. So infusing these new talent, new thoughts, and then managing them is also going to be beneficial for us. So the perfect balance in terms of employee demographic, that is giving us right dividend for us. And when you do that, there are two challenges. How do you manage multi-generational workforce in a large scale organization, right? When we have large scale of about 2.3 lakhs employees, which I'm talking about excluding our blue collar employees. Blue collar employees about 4.25 lakhs. I'm not even considering them, but I'm only talking about the white collar employees, which is about 2.3 lakhs. How do you manage them multi-generational, that scale, across different locations in the world, right? So that's a big challenge. While it is very beneficial for the organizations to have new generation agility of thinking, agility of decision making, but at the same time, as you rightly said, how to manage compliance, how to manage the governance, that becomes very important, right? So that's where I think technology is playing a huge role. So we as an organization also have been extremely forward looking, progressive in terms of having best of the technology implementations and interventions here, particularly in the area of HR as well, right? So we are also thinking of AI. We are having success factor across, but it is not so easy, because when you are running about 20 plus organizations or independent companies that you say, different companies have their different kind of DNAs, right? So we need to ensure that there is a certain core DNA culture that typically runs across everybody's blood. At the same time, we have given the flexibility and empowerment to be agile and take the right decisions in their respective ICs, independent companies, to be relevant and competitive in the market. So that perfect balance of having the core culture, core DNA intact, at the same time making a little bit of changes in their culture based on the context of the specific organizations, the product that they sell, the customer they are reaching out to. So that's another dimension that how we are doing that, right? Now coming back with that kind of scale and complexities, when you are actually managing the employees and the HR strategies, so our HR strategy is also very hybrid, right? So for example, the policies, again, right, where we need to have a standard fair policies across, but it has to be again customized based on the different geography, their different norms. So that kind of flexibilities are given. Similarly, looking at the multi-generational workforce, the expectation, as you said, that employees' expectation. So obviously, we need to be a little flexible in terms of managing the expectation of multi-generational workforces, right? While we do all those things, one thing is very clear, and that's the core in our HR strategy, that employees need to be marketable, both inside and outside. So while new generation, they might think that, okay, I need more the policies which are going to give me instant gratification, and also in terms of my, if you, let's say, salary, the disposable income should be high. We also need to educate people and say that, if you are looking for a longer tenure, which is beneficial for individual as well, because we can afford to give that kind of a career in such a huge organization conglomerate. At the same time, it is beneficial for the organization. So we are also educating employees to ensure that they have enough kitty in terms of their retirement, right? So our medical facilities are one of the best, I would say, in terms of the kind of facilities that we provide for employees, domiciliary reimbursement. It is for parents and those who are tenured employees post retirement. It's like a government organization that medical facility continues till death. So those are some of those advantages, and educating new generations, saying that how this is going to help them in future. Right? So that's one aspect. Second thing that we also see, which is most important, that how to ensure that employees, they put enough time, enough effort in terms of making them relevant in the market. So tremendous emphasis both in terms of the investment with regard to money, with regard to the managerial resources that is going to ensure the people are upskilling themselves, people are constantly learning and development that's happening. So you have a very great strategy to focus on the leadership, culture, and capability building. So capability building is our core USP, you would say. And while the tenured employees, old generations, they understand the value of that. New generations also, we are forcing them because their expectation, whatever it could be, but we are very clear that their expectation has to be matched with how they are going to develop themselves to be relevant. And with the changing scenario in terms of the new technology coming, with the environment changing, I think that is also that is going hand in hand, because employees are also realizing that with the changing in the job, changing in the role, unless they upskill themselves, unless they reskill themselves, it is not going to serve purpose for themselves. Here, I must also say that since we are dealing with the multi-generational people, there could be employees who are probably 50 plus, 55 plus. They might not be very savvy in terms of the new technology. And that's where I think what comes in is our HR interventions. Because HR is not only technology. Technology is an enabler. So how sympathetic are we? How empathetic are we towards those employees? How are we dealing with those employees, those who cannot be very tech savvy, but we are saying we are with them in terms of doing right coaching, counseling, putting them in the right job where probably technology uses could be little lesser as compared to the other areas. So that mix and match, balancing act, we are constantly doing to ensure that everybody is learning, growing, everybody is happy.
That's great insight. I can imagine the kind of workforce L&T managing, and I remember the L&T is one of the traditional organization. People taken longer tenure. People are there, and you talk about multi-generational people. I can see at least 3 to 4 generation people are minimum 3 generation people similarly numbered. In the organization are working, and not easy task. But yes, you rightly mentioned being relevant is something which is very, very important in the today's context. And how you are upskilling yourself, and of course, as an organizational duties, as an HR, how you are building capability across multi-generational people. I'm sure it's a very commendable job. So great. Thank you for sharing those insights. So let me now move to Yogesh. Yogesh, I know you have been pursuing your PhD from IIM Sambalpur, and you had recently published your research report or thesis on emerging technology in HR, impact on employee experience. I'm sure you will agree that we are seeing a clear shift, from intuition-based hiring to data-driven decision making. According to you, what does talent intelligence really look like in 2026, and how should organizations, think about it?
Thank you, Alok, for giving this opportunity and what Talent Recruit is doing for the hiring community. I think the most important piece that all of us need to realize is that we sit on a lot of data. And I think you take any organization today, we sit on very traditional data of, if an organization has about 1,000 people, they're definitely sitting on about at least 5,000 or 8,000 resumes. If we take 1:8 or 1:10 kind of conversion, and within this data, there are candidates that you've hired and kept, but there are candidates who may have been silver medalists, not ready for now, but ready for the future. And most important is that how do organizations harness that data? Because it's not about going out and finding out, getting more data from the market or from the various portals that we get to, but how smartly are we able to maneuver through this data that exists intelligently? You're able to harness it and then derive key matrices around it. So when you've done your hiring, do you have a measure of what's your quality of hire, which could come from retentions, which could come from performance metrics, because then how do you intelligently use to smartly do you more with less? It's not about for throwing in more resumes to the bucket, as Preeti said, that it is about finding that relevant skill for the future. But if you don't know what your quality of hire has been, or what, and then, and all this then comes with what's called integrating it all together. The whole concept of data lake. Currently, if you see in all organizations, they may have great looking HRMS products, but then when you look at their payroll systems are different. You're talking about time management is different, supply chain is different, but when you
Okay.
when you but But when you look at all these data, they actually capture the same individual employee's journey in different forms. And the whole thing is that how do you continuously bring in those integrated platforms together to really derive insights? Because what then happens is that from a siloed mindset of data existing in different formats, you're now bringing it together. I've seen organizations now, without naming, one of the organizations that I worked with, had gone on to the journey of really doing a skill mapping, that whole piece of every employee. And I've seen mature organizations, having worked with IBM, they do a very they ask every employee and every year on their journey to really clearly outline where are they on their skill matrix, in terms of beginner, intermediate, or a professional with demonstrable views. And that's how it starts, you start finding out where your buckets of individuals are. So the way I look at it, it is about bringing using what you have intelligently, bringing it together in a format which is integrated in a way that it can speak across various employee life cycle journey. It's not about, when you hire the person and that's where it ends, but it's also when the individual is there with you. So which is that quality of hire. And then how do you make use of your internal talent workforce to really identify your gaps and skills required for the future? Because you may want to bring in the training intervention, but do you know what do people want? It's also about the whole generational workforce, as you rightly say, as Sudipto said. So it's also about doing those intervention which are personalized enough. Gone are the days where you could be sent into a classroom to say, okay, this is the communication skills classroom. Every manager needs to do it. I don't think so. Those days are gone. The communication skills classroom could mean very different for somebody who's starting his career, or for somebody who's a mid-career manager, or somebody who's a seasoned professional who's using numbers to feel for results. For that individual, communication skills class could be very, very different because the numbers don't have a feeling, but you got to derive meaning out of it. So I think that's where the journey is going to be. Organizations that are going to be invested in this journey at now will you'll see the difference, because then their metrics of when it talks about cost of hire, time to fill, retentions, performance management will look clearly very different from organizations which are still getting. But I think the shift is going to happen very quickly. You're going to see this in the next 3 to 5 years being out there, because what you see is that if you're talking about 85 million jobs going as what you said from the World Economic Forum reports, you've got to be able to deploy 85 million people in something else. So the question is, how are you going to do that 85 million? So that's the exam question all of us have to keep answering and see how we can move from there. So that's my quick answer on what talent intelligence platforms or solutions are going to be for the future and for 2026. I think the journey has to begin now, if I would say.
So absolutely, I think harnessing data and data visibility. Now people don't have time to drive the understanding from some contextual data. They really want to be presented today in today's context. With AI coming in, presenting data in different ways, and or BI analytics tools are there which are giving you the presentation layer to the data so that the decision making can be taken. And of course, going forward, as you rightly mentioned, that a lot of things getting changed. We heard from all three panelists in terms of what is changing, what has been their experience, in their journey. So I can see that 100 plus people have joined, and here in this forum, from amongst the panelists, we have cumulative experience of 100 plus years. So I'm sure the people are getting their insights of what exactly is changing in this hiring and workforce landscape. So let us get into the second segment of this webinar in terms of the approach we have been taking. The first segment was talking more about the changing landscape, and now we're talking about the enterprise readiness and actionable strategies for organizations to look at it. So let me begin once again with Preeti. Preeti, from a leadership perspective, what should organizations start doing today to build a truly future-ready workforce for 2026 and beyond?
Oh, so there are many things from an organization ready perspective, but I think more predominantly the way I see it is like I said earlier, every role will be revised, relooked, rethought, and question ourselves all the time, saying that, do I need this role today? You know, the entire headcount planning, I mean, for the lack of a word, still called manpower planning. But, from that perspective, my entire planning of workforce for future has to align in such a way that my numbers are not limited only to fulfillment, but ability to use technology in a minimal way, at least in the next 1 year, as I see it. Two recruiters also have to kind of move ahead, way ahead than what traditionally recruitment has been. Use the database, pick up your keywords from Naukri, shortlist. The entire perspective has to change towards relationship building, networking, ability to source profiles beyond what's given in a Naukri or a LinkedIn. And that's where I think AI tools will come in handy. And so ability to learn, understand, know what the tool is. See, everybody is talking about great stuff on technology, everything. I agree with Yogesh. I mean, today, if you ask me from an pure HR systems perspective, there's no single system, one which collects everything together, also is efficient. We still continue to have technology gaps, even whether it's to do with reports, whether it's to do with systems, whether it's about workflow. And while we demand that flexible working in terms of adaptability and learning has to come from our own employees, ability to convert this system and have that fluent way of, data available to you, not to do typical MIS. Our guys are, our teams are pretty smart these days to use Excel and just provide any kind of data. But how can I have analysis which will help drive business decisions? Recruiters have to go beyond thinking of just, role. It's no more enough to know the business. It has to go beyond in terms of ability to upgrade skills for themselves. For example, if I'm hiring somebody for my fashion business vertical, ability to understand the kind of skills, ability to understand the whole workflow, what skills do you need and what does that skill mean? And then do your first level screening before it goes to the business leaders. That's a drastic, huge change. I won't say our HR teams are already yet there, but I think it's a journey. Some of these aspects are very, very important for organizations to start scaling up. AI needs to earn its place on the table before we push them to a corner office. I think that's very, very important in terms of driving my org ready processes. And I think we are on a journey, at least in our organization. A long way to go, I know for sure. But I think we'll get there like anybody else, I'm sure. What will differentiate for an organization is purely the ones who will hire less, the ones who will adapt technology faster, and the ones who will be able to also control their internal workforce by giving them newer roles. And obviously, those who adapt and learn are the only ones who are going to succeed. The remainings will probably finalize in that 85 unfortunate job losses. I wish we shouldn't reach there because, again, end of the day, the HR folks only end up doing those dirty jobs, not that we like it. But yeah, we represent the business and so we will do it efficiently, no doubt. But I think that's going to be the key, Alok. I think these are a culmination of all other factors which will play, and the ones who will really move fast, adapt, learn quickly are the winners in terms of organizations. Otherwise, we'll be where we are for a few more years.
Agree. I think you relevantly mentioned about the changing dynamics, when recruiters have to look at building relationship, trust. So because in the AI world, when we are talking about automation of a lot of manual work, which recruiters are doing, the key aspect is the human touch and human element.
See, and in fact, you're right. Alok, you said it so clearly. I mean, the current generation that we're talking about, and I know Sudipto must be having this challenge. These are generations who like to just be glued to their machines or laptops or whatever. Their human interaction is very, very limited. You look at all our young kids today, either they're on the phones or they're on the laptops or they're on the ChatGPT tools or AI tools or whatever. Their human connect is really not there.
Preeti,
I mean,
I'm just tempted to comment on that. In fact,
yeah.
while this is a kind of a social change, generational change that is coming up, but I am more worried about this change coming in the HR fraternity, not now, about 20, 30 decades ago.
Yeah, I know.
look at the HR, and every HR wanted to learn AI, ML, Excel. And if you look, the way HR used to operate probably 30 years ago, now HR is operating more as an kind of a uh, office person, looking only
Service
at
oriented. True,
computers,
true.
only at data. So that connection and this thing. So I'll give that aspects of change in the society, put it in the second. I think what are we do as an HR fraternity to address that? That itself is a larger challenge and the question.
Absolutely.
So I think
Absolutely.
Sudipto sir, you rightly mentioned, because I could see, and I was mentioning in the beginning that how HR has been transforming from operational to strategic role. If you see, when you started, I think you started as a personal HR personal role, long back to
Yeah.
28 years back. And that was the time when it was people, HR people were just for operational role. And it was very clearly even demonstrated in their role and designations as well, right? Now the things have completely changed and transformed. And when we are talking hybrid workforce, the gig workforce which is coming up, in a big way, because it's a skill-led world. You do not need probably every employee to be perm employee, or maybe you want to go for contractual or now gig, which are bringing more element of probably the skills to you. And if you look at India by 2030, 10% of India's workforce will be gig. So how organizations are making themselves ready to include the gigs into their workforce, because a lot of traditional companies like L&T probably could be seeing that how they get value in that particular ecosystem, when you see a lot of gigs are operating at the top level job seekers. So I'm sure a lot of changes is going to come in there. So coming to Sudipto, to you again, as you see as the organization scale, right? So HR becomes a system-driven function. You have seen that the kind of workforce you are managing in L&T Group. So, what operational models, policies, and governance frameworks should enterprise rethink today to stay resilient and efficient in 2026 and beyond?
Good question, Alok. I think if I have to just very quickly respond with my first line, I'd say that it is probably easy to reach the pinnacle, but much more difficult to be there consistently, right? So it's like you have seen that T20 World Cup is happening. Not a single team so far has been able to defend the trophy.
Correct.
So in the World Cup, every time a new new team has won the World Cup. So similarly, in the whole pace, whole expansion that we were seeing it in the organization, it is very easy to probably expand, to get into something very quickly. A lot of technology, lot of enablers, lot of forces are there. But the question, that's what I'll take it, two things. Preeti talked about relationship, and Yogesh talked about the data. I think we have to be very, very conscious about both the aspects. One relationship I'll talk about, that's about the quality that we are talking about, right? And the data, if I talk about, similarly, that how do we manage data with quality, right? Today, what is happening is that all that we are talking about, the AI output data, it all depends upon what goes in versus what is coming out. If it's garbage in, garbage out. So when organization scales, it is very, very important, and it is even more difficult to see that how do we manage quality data by way of inputting, and then only it is going to give us the right output. Most of the organizations you will find the managing of the data we are horrible at. And in multiple forums, I have asked HR, can you tell me, raise your hand if you say you are very confident about your data, demographic data, HR data. Not a single hand is raised. And I think that's where the quality output becomes a challenge, right? AI is what? AI is all about, as I say in my own, naive language, it's about 3P: past, pattern, and prediction. If my past and pattern is not depending on the quality data, prediction will also be very, very fragile. So So that's what I see a huge challenge, huge problem. And I think the good companies which have been able to sustain for long, I think they have put in enough time and effort and resources in terms of ensuring systems, processes, and governance. And you actually need a lot of people so far to manage that. Now, I think with the advent of technology, it is becoming easier. I think you can accelerate that process, but you still need quality mind to supervise that, putting the right plan, right direction to ensure that your systems and processes are robust. And as I said, that staying on the pinnacle is more difficult than reaching the pinnacle. Similarly, as the organizations scale and then they grow, you have to constantly put in enough, time, effort to ensure that you are, not just the HR operating models, but any business operating models are scalable in nature. So that is happening. So today, the number of order intakes that we talk about, there is no dearth of that for L&T. We have enough number of this thing. Our challenge and worry is, will we be able to deliver? So what kind of capability do we have? What kind of resources that we have? How are you going to manage that? How are you to redeploy the resources to ensure that we are able to deliver the quality output to our clients? And that's where I think our credibility comes in. So if you're not able to do that, then future will not get the right order. So that's much more difficult. And your policies should be more directional. At the same time, you should be able to support the expectation of multi-generational workforce, hybrid workforce.
Excellent. I think you mentioned about how the people in past have been working with respect to collecting the data, or creating the data. So actually, that concept of creating the data has gone, because the technology should be used in such an adaptive manner that the data comes automated. The moment you are building and creating data, it means the data-driven approach is missing. So I think with the proper utilization and adoption of technology.
Only point I'd say that you need to have right mind to
Correct.
create the right framework of collecting data, processing data, and giving the output data. I think that's where I see there is a gap. And that's where the human intervention would be extremely important to make use of data in a very, very prudent manner. You cannot afford to be just an user of AI. You need to see that how you contextualize your
Correct.
technology and AI in your organizational context. And for that, you need to have a higher amount of brain application to ensure that you are creating right framework to use the data properly.
Absolutely. That's what I think Yogesh was mentioning about the data-driven approach. That's the shift that is going to be there, because you should be very, very clear on your data point, what you're going to drive. And that's what we're talking about, the measurable outcome. So I just like to ask you, maybe if you can share some specific example, if possible, for you, Sudipto, where change in HR operations or policy significantly improve some workforce efficiency or engagement, if you have some examples to share in form of some measurable numbers.
You're asking about the policies or processes?
Any policy which you've been, forming or framing, which have a significant impact, on those measurable outcomes in terms of efficiency improvement or something visibly very, very clear.
Yeah, as I said, I think the whole aspect of using the data itself is a big game changer for us, right? So as I said, that we have construction side, non-construction side. In construction, we had about 8, 9 independent companies. Non-construction side, we have about 5, 6. Then we have on the service segment. So it's a very diversified conglomerate. Now, what was happening earlier was that every independent companies were managing their own data, they're managing their own training processes very differently, where we had a core policies, but managing that was very different. Now we have done a huge exercise in terms of centralization of our data. So as a result, we have not only used SuccessFactors, pay review, there are multiple technologies that we have done, and the visibility of data across is extremely high right now. So that was the first required step that we have done that. And, so any point of time from the corporate, we are able to see what's happening across because of the data. And we are extremely strong and robust in terms of the inputting of data and proper governance to check it from time to time, multiple levels of checks to see that data are correct. The moment you do that, then any decisions and the policies that we are taking it, that is becoming very easy to implement. And it is also ensuring that there's a right impact that is happening.
Got it. Great. Thank you. Thank you for these insights. So let me come to Yogesh now. So I think he must be overhearing a lot of information inputs. And of course, the very important question coming to you. Yogesh, when you see every organization today is talking about AI in hiring specifically, right? So, but very few know from where to start or begin. What does the practical and scalable AI adoption roadmap look like for enterprises as per you?
I think fair question, and I saw somebody asking that question right in the beginning when I was talking. So
Okay.
I think the first important piece is you've got to take your current HR, MS or ATS, whatever you've got, and see what elements of it you can automate. Which could be as simple as a scheduling software. That okay, why do you need schedulers to go out and talk to the candidate or talk to the hiring manager? But can there be a way to integrate it in such a way that once the candidate is screened, one, obviously the first thing most important is most organizations, how do they use their ATS? Is it for, you know, putting a resume because you have to make an offer, or is it for hosting jobs? It actually starts from there. So if you really ask me from scratch, it's about how do you integrate your ATS to the external sources, which could be all your job boards, without naming any one of them or talking about them. So, and how does that data then flows into your recruiting inbox? What is the discipline the recruiter uses? The second piece, we may talk about automation. Automation does not happen if your discipline doesn't exist. If your recruiter still continues to get resumes through emails, then you've defeated the ATS. So the discipline of actually managing your screening process, because that's where the data starts speaking. The time to hire, or how many days your resumes have sat in the inbox, and then the quality of interaction that you have with the applicants, because at the end of the day the applicant has applied to a mailbox or to a job board. So that's the discipline. I think that's one piece. I will talk about automation, but I'll also talk about discipline of how you need to do. And then how do you expect your hiring managers to also fall in line of, using the ATS to screen your resumes and say, okay, these are the candidates which could move to the round 2 or 3. Do you have integrated, if you have integrated systems of evaluation, then integrate it into your ATS. Most companies then again move out and then send those offline tests which lie in some mailbox. So unless you don't have that enterprise thought process where you can integrate those tests directly to the candidate through the systems, you again fail from there. And then how do you do the scheduling system? I think if you can do this as basics, this can be I would say as foundational level 0 or 1. I think if organizations have moved beyond this, then they could look at, how do you ensure that if you've been hiring for over the years, how do you repurpose your JDs? Because if you really look at it, your job descriptions today are it's like a cottage industry. If I am a hiring manager, I may write a job description as X. The same job description for the same role after 2 years may look very different. But how am I using the data that exists for my jobs that are existing within the organization? I'm able to bring that out. So standardization of job descriptions, because ultimately the attractiveness of the role outside is a large part of how you communicate. Is there because it then talks about your culture, ethos, and what you want to hire. I think so how do you standardize the job description? Then really, if you were to ask me on and if you've got that right, then how do you go down to building those competency-based evaluation systems? Because today now you have a large number of recruiting tools or platforms that can, integrate to your job description and throw in those questions, right? Because the art of hiring is all about asking, doing it in a way, doing interviews in a way that can, build a story versus, starts and stops, because most hiring decisions are never made in one interview. They're made in 3 to 5 interviews. So how you able to build those stories, integrate the data from, from the competency base. But I think these are some of the fundamental shifts. We may be talking about resume screening tools that exist today. The Booleans have become smarter. I'll still say, and I will take Sudipto's idea that, it's the past which is fed into that algorithm to say, okay, if you've written this, you'll get shortlisted. So I would still say take it with a pinch of salt, but I think if the systems have the right competency interviewing matrix, defined questions which the tool can throw, that what the hiring manager can ask, which then creates what's called how do you bring in the whole relationship bit? If you ask the same question to 5 candidates, then you're building that relationship with that role, the job, that thing that comes in, versus, today if I'm in a good mood, I may ask 10 questions. If I'm not in a great mood, I'm in a hurry, I may ask 5 and still make my hiring decision. That's how do you move away from the inconsistency pattern, because people are discerning, people do get to know. So I think these are some of the fundamental things I would talk about, should be the journey ahead of, how AI in hiring. I mean, AI in hiring is still a little away, but I think the fundamentals have to be, are you utilizing your ATS? Is there a discipline of how your ATS is integrated to your various job boards and to your databases or to your whole system? Is there a discipline of how your hiring managers and recruiters really use it? How do you juice that whole system? Because I think we are also, as organizations, guilty of not going back to those uh, organizations to say demand on it, that hey, if I'm paying for this HRMS system or the ATS system which looks shiny, are all the knobs moving? I want to move all the knobs. I don't want to take 2 features and believe that the rest of it. And then how do I then use that to manage my processes? I think scheduling is a great example, and interviewing processes, I would say, could be another. Obviously, managing your offers, onboarding is definitely out there, but I'm sticking to what core should be to what the future should look for at least 2 years. I'm just talking 2 years. 24 months down the line, it look very different. But I think if somebody has done this, I think they'll be ready after 24 months.
Right. So I think you rightly mentioned, because the purpose should be known, how you are adopting technology. But I'm seeing a lot of changes in last couple of years, when people have a purpose-driven adoption of tool, or when they're going for a tool, they know what are the challenges they're facing and how they really go to next level to adopt them in a very structured manner, because if you buy any tool but you don't adopt it, there's another challenge, right? We get into. And also, when we are talking about the complexity, you mentioned about a lot of candidates applying to emails, so how you are creating an integrated ecosystem. And those are the key aspect. The platforms are becoming more integrated, because that's how the seamless experience have to flow in. And the organizations which are still thinking because of their own inherent monopolistic or technical incapability perspective, that they don't want to integrate their platform to the ecosystem, they will be in some time would be left behind. So I think thanks for sharing this insight. So I think there are a lot of questions, so I think we have to come there, but I want to take a quick, quickies from all three of you on one of the questions. How, if you look at the entire hiring ecosystem today, you mentioned, Yogesh, the applicant tracking system or AI-driven recruiting platform, assessment, sourcing tool, AI interview platforms, So how should organizations rethink their HR tech stack to stay competitive in 2026? So let's start with I think Yogesh shares some of the thoughts. Let's start from Preeti, and then we can move the same questions to both of you others. Yeah, please go ahead.
I exactly talk what Yogesh also mentioned a while ago. It's not about, if you're able to sustain the anticipated AI strength which is coming, even for the next 24 months, if we are able to stabilize our current way of doing things, will really play a key role. So, for example, my entire hiring strategy for next year, not necessarily only from budgets and other stuff, the entire hiring will focus largely from the point of speed, from the point of scale, role redesign, ability to internally move workforce before shopping out in the market, ability to kind of question every time why I'm creating this role. Is this a skill that doesn't exist within my organization? And alongside, of course, use AI for your screening, for your shortlisting, for scheduling, for your sourcing, because AI can play a very, very good key role today in sourcing. But again, the discipline is required, making sure that you don't create shortcuts, to close this. And I think that's where people like us, while we continue to emphasize to our team saying this is important, how quickly will they adapt and learn are the heroes of tomorrow. As
Yeah.
simple as
Perfect. As per you, Sudipto, you like to add here what you think, this hiring ecosystem, use of technology, HR stack, perspectives.
Yeah, I think even before going to the future, what I think I must compliment that what Yogesh pointed out. I think that's extremely important, and I think going back to basics, right? That I think we have in past also used so many technologies, right? ATS system, etc. But the discipline or ability to have the single source of truth from one
Correct.
system, that's where I think we all struggle so far. Having said so, take an oath that okay, that should not be a problem. Now I see the way AI is coming up. It is only to talk about two things: scale and quality. So how it is, I'm telling you. So if, for example, if you see that there is a huge number of applications, huge number of open positions are there, I think that's where I'm going to use AI. That's where I'm used to use technology, because I do not have that kind of capability to manage such scale, and technology will help me to narrow it down. But the point is, the moment it is getting narrowing it down, then it becomes even more imperative that now I'll use my own human intervention and insights to focus on the quality, because technology cannot give you that quality to bring in insights. It will only help you to manage scale. But once the scale is managed, then the human being will have time to ensure that okay, now I focus on the quality, to ensure that very specific quality skills are identified, they are engaged with, they are, I'm doing the right kind of attraction proposition to them, and then I'm onboarding them properly.
Yeah. Any closing comment from you, Yogesh, on this?
I think I have a little bit of a contrarian view. So I think the the future is going to look like a gig workforce. Organizations internally will have to look at talent, and as Preeti pointed out, internal mobility of workforce. And your roles are going to become shorter. You may do a role for 12, 14 months, but after 14 months, you will have to find another role within the organizations. And organizations which will be able to leverage that workforce matrix, in the sense that where are my people, where are their skills, how does it get to it, and then use that, because you can always go out and find more people. There's always that whole piece of there's someone else who's there, but when you know who are your people internally, where they can be deployed, and what interventions are required. Because most important is how do you make them employable and marketable at a point of time is an important piece that we keep forgetting, to really fill that. So I think that's my view, that it's going to be a gig force work economy, internal gig workforce economy. I'm not talking
Correct.
about the external, I'm talking the internal gig force economy, and you'll see that evolving in organizations very quickly now.
Got it. Great. So let me pick up some questions. So I'll pick up few. You can choose, guys. You can decide. Otherwise, I'll name some of the panelists to answer. One question from Arjit Ghosh: what strategies are proving most effective in attracting Gen Z and upcoming Gen Alpha talent? Preeti, you want to take it up?
Sorry, what's the question?
What strategies are proving most effective in attracting Gen Z and Gen Alpha talent?
Interesting. I think there's nothing strategic about it. To me, as I see it, these workers are going to come in. These people are going to come into the system. How quickly they adapt and learn is going to be the key. Costs will remain at bay. The ones who shine faster, where their ability to think future ahead is going to be the game changer. These are not going to be, if these people are going to come with an expectation that, I'm going to do routine work, it's not going to work. Ability to learn. When I was hearing through this whole conversation today, in my mind, and I'm sure Sudipto and Yogesh will agree, when we didn't have Naukri, when we didn't have systems, we did all of this manually to the similar scale that we're talking about. And we could apply our mind and still do exceptionally well. Today, you have tools, you have technology to support it. Probably the speed where we would take for one hire in those days about 8 weeks, today you can do that in 3 to 4 weeks. There are apps, there are tools, everything available. Yes, but to me, as I see it, all these apps, tools, everything has to be one collective system, which will happen in a way that finally we'll get to feel that the process makes sense. Today, we are using technology, we are using all of this, but still there are gaps in the process. So how these young workers who are so glued on to the system, they understand better than us when it comes to system usage. We're still learning. I still use tools and trainings to kind of learn and upgrade myself. But if these kids who are aware of exactly how this works, and if they can apply their mind, I think they will do wonders.
Okay, got it. I think the question from Gautam, maybe Yogesh would like to take it up. What major hiring trends do you foresee shaping 2026 and beyond? Maybe we discuss all this, but you like to quickly summarize, Yogesh.
I think the hiring trend that's really going to come in 2026 is how do you do more with less? It's not
Yes.
about
Correct.
more, it's getting out. It's how are you able to, again, I'm coming back to the first question where I said, are you utilizing your internal data to first do your hiring? Are you just going to go out and buy more data from the market to do more? And that's so how are you going to do more with less? Uh, Cost, so which means cost. I think the second piece is quality of hire, which then means that have you hired the right person who's going to be doing that job for you for the next 24 months at least. I'm not talking about 12 months, but 24 months. But if and at a performance level that's expected by the organization. And third is, are you hiring a talent which is fungible, which means that after 24 months, I will be able to evolve that individual to do something else because I'm not looking at people who are going to be because the job is not going to remain the same. So I think those are the matrices, tough matrices, tough matrices to evaluate. But I think if one was to go, if one was to do a very basic ways of putting that matrix, it's about if you're going to manage your cost of hire, look at your retention rates and make sure that the individual has performed to that scale that's required. I think if you're going to measure that well, I think there is the path
Yeah.
in about 2 years' time.
Sure, great. I think there's a question asked by two guys, Neha Ananya and Rohan Nayak. The question is, if you had to redesign your hiring process from scratch today, what would you do differently? I think, Sudipto, would you like to take this up?
I may not be the right person, but I think I would still say that mm, the I think I'm going to use the technology to manage the scale, which I have already talked about, right? Because I think the entire aspect, I don't want to compromise on the fundamentals, right? So the way we have been doing it, I think that same aspects of what I need, how do I get it, those things remains the same, right? I'm going to only see is that, if, as Preeti also mentioned, that the managing scale, it also, helps us in terms of my efficiency by way of cutting time. So if I have a huge number of requirement, I'm going to use the technology to narrow it down, and then I'm going to focus more on the quality of that thing, right? Which was earlier probably was not possible. Today it is possible with the uses of technology. And as I was saying that, so I think while the redesigning of the job, job enrichment, fungibility of talent, those concepts will remain the same. I think where I'm probably going to use more of the technologies, more in terms of the hiring, which probably, I'm still saying that I'm not going to use technology to a great extent on the other aspects. When I have my internal talent, I have been seeing them day in, day out. I really don't want to use technology and then say that, I'm going to do a shortcut by using them. But where I don't know my talent, when I'm taking it from outside, that's where I'm going to put my bet on the technology. And when I have my internal talent, I'm going to put my own effort, my own judgment, my own sincere time towards seeing them, understanding them, evaluating them, understanding their aspiration, and use the fundamental processes as it was earlier.
Great. So I think you'll bet on technology big time. That's great to hear. There's a question from Advait, Sai Krishna Panda, who's asking, what are the some common mistakes organizations make when adopting AI in hiring? Maybe Yogesh, you want to take this up?
I think first biggest mistake is you trust it blindly, in the sense that let's start with resume screening. You put it and you believe that it's screening the best resume. But I can assure everybody here on this, all 74 or 80 of us, is that we can today make a resume tailored to the job description and pass it through. So you probably, and there is empirical research which says that 25% of all resumes that are there in an applicant stage are fake. So
Absolutely.
there's enough research which says that. So the biggest mistake is you blindly trust the tool to do that screening, and I think avoid that. The second piece is, and this the second piece is slightly more controversial, because you got to understand that the models have been built by any one of us. So let's say if I think in my logic of decision tree in a certain pattern, then it's my logic which is out there as the base block. So let's say if I have an inherent bias in my in saying that I need somebody who's of ABC type or D type, and that's the individual, and that's where then the model starts learning from. So remember that there's an inherent bias in every tool that is created. So being able to have that hat, and that's the thinking hat that has to be there as a recruiter or as a leader, to say that yes, I'm using it as a guidance, and I will make the decision. If you let the AI make the decision, then you're going to get cut copy size of what I want, and which is what I have created as a tool. So I think avoid that trap. Third is the ability to you know think that uh, you know this is the tool which has given me the top 5 candidates, and they are the best, but without realizing probably the person who was the 20th in that list could be the right person. So are you really going out and investing your time and energy like the traditional recruitment used to happen? Sometimes I've had hiring managers who may have interviewed 30 candidates and not hired anybody. But in that process of speaking to 30 candidates for a particular job, there's a lot of insights you gather, which you gather very tacit information about the market. You gather information about, how organizations operate. You gather information about, what's the general thinking about that role in the market, because, when you meet, transformation managers, and that itself is a tacit knowledge that you gather through those interviews, and you probably, you know, the cultural fit is something that comes only after meeting people. So remember that culture fit is not, AI is not going to solve
Agree.
culture fit. Don't expect it to be that magic wand. There is still some distance, but at this point of time, I think these are 3 mistakes to avoid
Correct.
in the current
I think
context.
I think you mentioned, Yogesh, about of course, people are making their own resume basis the job description. Of course, this will keep on happening when AI is used by everybody. But yes, what is happening the next level is AI conversational interview. I think then the AI is deeply, assessing the skills which is mentioned in the resume and much better doing than the human interview at the first level of, you say the assessment of the candidate. Of course, let me take another question, which is from Arijit Ghosh again. How will geopolitical factors and global mobility policies influence talent acquisition strategies in the next decade? Probably, Preeti, you want to take it up?
I think the way I see it is availability of talent will be high, irrespective of whichever country they're coming from. But availability of role-ready people is going to be really difficult. the hiring process, in my view, is going to go slow, especially because we are going to review someone who is role ready. And really, I'm talking about mid-senior and above here. While at the mid-level and below, the way I see it is numbers will increase, but we'll not be able to fulfill until and unless the relationship by the recruiters is built, skill understanding is done, number of rounds of interviews are reduced. So some of those aspects of the process have to really come in. And I think that's where you'll be able to attract the right talent and use the right talent for the organization need that you have. Otherwise, internally, I'm sure we have enough number of people who kind of cater to that if it's just basic fulfillment of a role. I mean, if you look at today, Bangladesh, a lot of candidates are coming here. If you look at it earlier, any expat hiring was not beyond 28 to 30%. Today, it's almost 75%. So, the need for people to come to India has increased compared to the other way. So, yeah, it's going to create more. The demand is not going to be there, but supply.
But I think with the hybrid ecosystem, remote work culture, I think there is no mobility required. You can tap talent from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, but again,
So probably
it's the skill
that
that
is another strategy.
matters. Again, you will have a lot of people around, but which skill do you want to tap and whether can you do it remotely is going to be a key question in your fulfillment of the role.
Yeah. Shopatna is asking about how hiring with AI can redesign hiring to reduce hiring bias. I think maybe Sudipto, hiring bias, you like to take this up?
Yeah, I mean, see, it's like it can cut both ways, right? I mean, one way I would say that there are people, they say that with the technology coming in, bias should be less. At the same time, I say the technology has been actually set by individuals. So at the time of constructing that, if there is a bias, then automatically that bias will continue to be there. But that's why I say that again, we have to go back to our basics that we have all talked about: halo effect, horn effect, right? Your own integrity. So if that is not there with the human being, whether you use technology or non-technology, it doesn't matter. It is continue to have those biases. I think challenge is that, how do we create the right kind of a culture? How do you ensure that your organization's governance system is that where you discourage biases, you penalize biases, and once that mindset, that culture is set, then whether you use technology or not, it will give you the right output.
Absolutely. So of course, even technology, when we're talking in our perspective in TalentRecruit, how we have to limit bias, that's where we have built a very strong AI governance tool, a metrics, where in the back end, it keeps checking the bias and recorrecting it, and also giving the entire reporting process to the organization, how, the system is, or AI is really helping you to hire without any bias. Of course, the human bias, technology bias, some element will remain, but how we minimize to the minimum level or negligible level is a key part. I think there's a question from Arun: how should companies practically start using AI in recruitment without overcomplicating the process? I think this has been answered. Similarly, question from Sai Kiran: in 2026 and beyond, will sustainable competitive advantage in hiring come from owning better AI tool, or from building stronger internal capability to analyze, interpret, and act on talent data? I think this is again been answered, by Preeti and other panelists. So I think Yogesh has taken the part, we answered these questions. I think there was another question in the last from, can we get rid of with resume in hiring? Can there be any other medium from for the same? Just a thought. I think Rohan has asked this question. Anybody want to just quick comment on this?
No, resume or no resume doesn't matter today. I think ability to communicate to the panel in terms of what the person brings to add value to the organization will be the differentiator, how one communicates. I mean, while the tools are all there, those will happen. At the same time, simultaneously, even if the tools are there and the person walks in but unable to clarify his past, it will not move on. And you shouldn't forget that at the end of the day, recruitment hiring is still 50% as a probability today whenever you hire. So, it's absolutely a combination of multiple things.
It's less than that. You do any empirical
now, yes.
It's less. Yeah, no, I think the only answer I could give to that question here is that while communication is the key, I think what one every candidate, I'm talking about all of us out here, has to have the ability to be the CEO of our own company.
Yes.
So let's say Alok has a company, but he's a CEO of a company that Alok Gupta also comes in. So it's important that how do you hold that currency in the market and say, okay, why does somebody want to engage with you at whatever cost? And having that ability to continuously build that engagement through whatever platform. You could use Instagram, you could use resumes, you could use storytelling, that's a part, but it's about how do you ensure that that talent is goes out. And because if you really look at it, if you go back and today look at it, if Meta is going to pay somebody about $100 million to be the AI scientist, I'm sure that individual had something which is uniquely different from any other individual that exists or all the overall workforce that you talk about. So I think that's the key differentiator. Resumes will remain or not remain is a different question, but I think it's about how you are able to continuously be able to create that whole competitive advantage as an individual within the organizational ecosystem or out of it. Because I'm again going back, we're going to get into that whole gig workforce internal model very, very soon. If you're talking 10%, I could talk more.
Absolutely fantastic. So thanks. I think most of the questions answered. I think one of the person, Cheshita, has asked where we can maintain human touch in the entire transition process phase. I think that has been also answered. Maybe that's important. I think we were talking about Preeti and other panelists talking about how your major focus when AI is taking a lot of manual work is to remain in touch and build a relationship and trust with the candidates at different stages of candidate engagement. So probably touch upon that, and probably you are there to really win the best talent. So I'm sure we had a great experience, panelists who decoded the hiring landscape for 2026 and beyond. And I'm sure, the viewers who have joined in large numbers must be benefited with the insights you have got from them and the discussion which we had now. Over to you, Ananya, and thank you once again very much, everybody, Preeti, Yogesh, and Sudipto. Thank you. Over to you, Ananya.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
a huge thank you to all the panelists. Those were really valuable insights. And as we come to the end of today's sessions, here are a few takeaways, I would say. Hiring in 2026 requires more structure, intelligence, and alignment with business outcomes. And also, skill first thinking is becoming a core foundation for organizations. And most importantly, enterprise readiness is now leadership priority, I would say. So, on behalf of the entire team, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our esteemed panelists for sharing their time and insights with us today. And to all our attendees, thank you for being such a wonderful audience and for actively participating. And we hope this session brought valuable perspectives that you can take back and apply within your organization. And for more such sessions, insights, and upcoming events, we invite you to follow us on LinkedIn for exclusive updates. And we look forward for bringing you more such insightful webinars. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Really
opportunity.
appreciate it.
Bye.